السلام حياة قد جاء في القرآن أن السلام.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to iTrend on ITV. We're sitting today and chatting to one of the most remarkable people that we have in our community, a lady who's constantly giving back, whose every post is talking about paying it forward, about doing a good deed for someone, and this needs to be continued forward. It's something she reinstills in her learners on a regular basis, and something I think that we, no matter what age we're at, can take value from this. We underestimate the value of doing small things. We underestimate the value of kindness to the person next to us. Charity, doing things to others, doesn't have to be on a grand scale. It's things that we do every single day. Being kind to a neighbor, being smiling in your own home to your family members, showing a little bit of kindness and generosity, being grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every single blessing that we have. With the matrics fully fledged into their exams, it's a tough time of the year. And people like this lady sitting in my studio are always the ones who are in the forefront, where students are knocking on our doors at all odd hours saying, we need a little bit of help here, we need a bit of help. But she's someone who never turns them away, because not only is this her work, but this is her passion. It's something that we've all come to know her for as well. So I think giving back is become synonymous with the name of Shanaaz Dockrat Ayob. Shanaaz, assalamu alaikum and welcome to the studio.
Wa alaikum assalam, Zaheerah. Jazakallah for having me back once more.
It's such a pleasure. I think, you know what, when we think about exam time, we think about matrics, we think about students, your name always just ties in and pairs up with it. So there was no choice to have anyone else but you in studio.
No,
today.
Jazakallah, I feel humbled, and really you're giving me way too much credit.
I don't think enough at all. Shanaaz, Matric is such a petrifying year. I always say I think the exams would be a small aspect of it, but I think what we put on the social pressures as parents, as family, as communities, and then also the anxiety of having to see your name in the newspaper at the end of the year. I mean, I think back to when I was in Matric and I still get anxiety about it. And I think at some point we need to stop doing this to these kids. It's just too much.
Zaheerah, I completely agree with you. The amount of stress that comes with writing a matric exam is enormous on a scale that is so difficult to comprehend. But as every parent knows, that year when your learner is in your child is in matric, and I call them my children as well, right? There is so much of emphasis placed on that symbol, that mark, that APS score, that sometimes I think that we don't look at the bigger picture. Today, alhamdulillah, my matrics have started their first paper. They're writing paper 1. I think they should be done by now, alhamdulillah. And I've already started getting messages where, Appa, I am so nervous, and what do I do, and how do I go about this, you know? And I always tell them, the first thing I do is I say in the morning of your exam, or every day, I would like to encourage that, right? I encourage them, I say, start with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Read your 2 rakat Salatul Hajjah. Give out a little bit of charity. May it be 1 rand, 5 rand, 10 rand. It's not about the amount. A loaf of bread, some eggs. We did that on Sunday night, in fact, with the learners, right? And remember, you need divine help. There's only so much that we can do. But remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the ultimate planner. He's most merciful. And we've got to understand that effort, dedication, and pre-planning is important. We have some learners that go into that paper and they are so nervous. And I tell them, just breathe. You know, take a deep breath, close your eyes, try and picture everything that we learn throughout the year, because we're working constantly. You know, I have learners that have been coming to me from grade 6. And they become like my children. They grow up in my house. They become part of our family. And I always say, don't focus on that score or that number. Focus on yourself. Don't focus about pleasing everybody around you. Know that this is from you. It is a gift that you have. And every learner has a different gift.
Yes.
You understand? And we've got to sort of like embrace an individual for who they are, not for what we want them to become.
But what I love and what's so remarkable is how you tie in such a strong Islamic ethos into the idea of also taking on matric exams, and the fact that they have to be conscious about it all the time, the prayers that are given with it, the charity. It's such a holistic way of approaching any difficulty that you may come across in your life.
Correct, you're correct there. And I teach both Muslims and non-Muslims. So I always try and incorporate it in the charity, because I feel when you give back, it's like the pay it forward that I have on my page, that it comes back to you in some way. It will come back to you in ways that are unimaginable, and it will come back to you at the times when you least expect it. But because everybody is dealing with some kind of stress, and Matric in particular. So I first of all encourage a healthy eating plan. I know that's that's something we all. It's like that rushing out in the morning without breakfast, and then having a complete slump when you are in your paper, because number one, you don't have enough glucose, your carbohydrates, your energy levels are down, right? Stay away. And I'm going to, this is something that I really needed to discuss on TVs. Stay away from energy drinks.
Yes.
We do not understand how damaging that is. It will give you that high for that period of time, and then immediately when you have your crash, you start to doubt yourself, you start to get nervous, you get jittery, and you don't understand that you actually know your work. It is there. It's stored there. You just got to find it.
And I think that's such a valid point, because we don't also comprehend how what we're putting into our bodies actually is what's coming out as well,
Right.
and what a huge impact it makes on who we are.
It's a massive impact on my learners, because starving yourself and trying to cram in enormous amounts of work before a paper is a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
Start early, prepare, have your mind maps ready. Your environment is very important. I have a little exercise that I do with my learners. You can try it at home with the kids as well, and they'll tell you, for those of them that are watching, they'll tell you I do that. And I put an empty bag on their back, and then I start jamming a whole lot of things into their bag, and I'll even put a brick and a rock.
I love it.
Right, you understand? And and I'll say, start walking. And at first you running, and then you're slowing down, and then you're slowing down when it gets heavier. Because the lesson in that is you cannot have baggage and still be performing at your peak. You cannot be a person filled with anger. You cannot have hatred. You cannot be coming from a home environment where there's so much of disruption, and there's so much of dis-ease, and there's no peace, and then still be expected to perform at your peak.
Absolutely.
Right? I've had learners come to me who have taken taxis from squatter camps and from Joburg and from all over, and they make it, and they come with the sole intention to learn and to further their education, because they are dedicated. And it's not about the work that I do. It's about them just grasping and understanding. And that is what is important. I praise every teacher, because every teacher is a saint. And there cannot be enough thanks for the work that every teacher is doing.
I think the value of teachers is just priceless.
No, it is.
What they give to their students, what they give to people so selflessly, because I seldom find any teachers who will work during the restricted hours of what a school says. There's always a whole lot of work afterwards. There's work in the evenings. They carry the children. And as you're saying, they become your children. You carry that personal, emotional baggage home as well. And so I think hats off to every teacher that's out there for what they do.
That we have to do. We have to take our hat off to every teacher. And let's focus on the learner, but right? Yes. Let's focus on the Matric exam. I tell them, like for example, today's paper 1. For some moms who in grade 11 the kids haven't yet written, there's a bit of a guideline that they can go through, right? It is very important to work with past papers. I encourage it. It is not that the same questions will come in identically, but the questions will be phrased in the same way.
Right.
So many times you're sitting with the learner over a period of a week, and you're discussing all these aspects, and you're going down with you teaching them skills, and then they've got to understand how to apply the skills that you've taught. Mm-hmm. So they'll know their poetry. It's all in their head, and the minute the questions comes, they're like blank. You understand? It comes in the exam and they blank and they're looking, but there's an application method.
Yes.
So we teach them how to apply themselves. We teach them how to sort of do a visual literacy. Visual literacy in poetry means I literally make my learners close their eyes during a lesson. They will tell you. And I take them, if we're doing a poem of, like, for example, one of the poems in our Matric syllabus this year is about vultures. Initially, when you look at the word vultures, you think it's only about the birds. But it's actually so much more. They become overwhelmed because they look at the length of the poem and they don't realize that it's actually about the Belsen War, and it's about what happened in Germany, and it's about the suffering of so many millions of people dying. And you've got to teach them compassion, because so many of them don't know the history.
Yes.
So you take them back, you show them pictures, because many learners, they can learn better
visually.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Not by writing. You understand? And as teachers, we've got to appreciate them for that.
I'm so glad you speak about that and the accounting for that, because many learners, like you say, learn in different ways, and not all are going to be able to learn auditorily and watch that. But if they see it and they visually learning, they'll be able to just give you back exactly what you need because you've given it in a different modality.
You're so right. That is so right. So what I do is I'll use some aids. I'll take a picture. We'll go onto the internet. I'll show them the picture. I'll tell them, close your eyes, visualize what we've just learned. Remember my voice in your exam. Okay,
that works.
Right. If you are stuck, pause. Put your pen down. Breathe.
Yeah.
Go back to the answer, right? Look at your answer. Did you formulate it correctly? Look at your question. Go in there with a good set of highlighters, because highlighters, when you highlight something, it just sort of looks clearer on the page to you, right? Because look at that, there's a whole lot of words there. It's all jumbled up on the page. So if you take a highlighter, look at your mark allocation, because many learners just start writing. They don't see that maybe perhaps for a one mark question, you do not have to write. Girls tend to write like quarter page.
Yes.
You understand?
Absolutely.
Whereas boys want to give one word answers and then just get it done with, right? So I said, see which is the possible answer in there, which sort of resonates the correct method of answering that question.
And I think these are also important tips, not just for students who are in Matric, but these are for any learners writing exams.
Right, and we run workshops throughout the year, right? We run workshops closer to exams, and it's a bit difficult for me to see learners one-on-one because of the time frame, but I do that closer to the exam time.
Yes.
And I apologize, if there are some people that really need that time and I can't see the kids individually, but I do try and put everybody in. But it's not about the teacher. The teachers throughout the year, they give so much. It's about that a learner that makes up their mind that this is what I need to study, this is my time frame, this is how much time I have left, this is how I'm going to space my life. There must be time for exercise. There must be time for social interaction in the home. I would tell them to sort of put their cell phones away.
I was going to say, thank goodness you're not encouraging the cell phones and the games.
I'm not encouraging. And then what about Fortnite?
Yes, that's the only thing. Every mother I speak to is saying that's what their kids are obsessed with.
Yes, every mother calls me and says, like, Shanaaz, what do I do? And I'll say, welcome to the club, because right?
You know it.
And then what I found very useful is that, I don't know if it will work with some parents, once a week with my boys, I make sure I have carte blanche on, right? Although the music sort of gives them that sort of nostalgia of Sunday night. So we don't watch it on a Sunday. Yeah. We do it another day of the week, right? So it doesn't give them that feeling. Yeah. I find that carte blanche is so informative. And it gives them like this, I encourage them to read newspapers, watch carte blanche, see what's happening a little bit in the news so that you read the Sunday Times, the front page. You understand? Look at your local newspapers, right?
Encourage the discussions.
Right. Look at all of that and know what's happening.
Absolutely.
Because so many times they are focused on social media, on the other things, that when it comes to the things that may not be important to them, like politics, and which, right? People that are game changers in the country, people that are going out there and making a difference, they need to know these things.
Absolutely. And I think what's lovely about that is also being able to take that information you've learned and then be able to put it into those answers as well, because you make it real, you make it concrete, and you're also showing the extra general knowledge that you have. Stay tuned. When we come back after the ad break, we continue the conversation.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back after that ad break. We're chatting to educator, motivational speaker, and community leader, inspirer, the list goes on, Shanaaz Dockrat Ayob. Shanaaz, we were chatting a little bit about exam tips, and this wasn't necessarily for matrics, but every student. Give us a few of the tips that students can use during the exam, because as you mentioned, first it's the holistic outlook, it's the way we approach things, it's ensuring our prayer, our charity are part of it. And then we're getting into exams. And as you mentioned, the highlighting, need to check the mark allocation, how we actually want to answer. But sometimes you're just daunted. You're just petrified sitting there.
Yes, because everything looks so, it looks like you cannot accomplish all of that in that short frame, right?
Yes.
So time is very important, right? I tell my learners that essentially they have 2.5 to 3 hours to complete a task. What they create, let's look at paper 1 first, with creative writing, and I'll go through everything very briefly, right? Creative writing requires that you do pre-planning. So choose a topic that you are mostly that you can write the most about, a topic that you that sort of speaks to you, right? Some learners like to choose a picture, while others are good with words, right? So when you look at that picture, every element of that picture has to be included in your writing piece.
Yes.
So some people are okay with mind maps, other learners say they prefer bullet points, and some of my learners will say, but you know what, I'm just going to write down an entire essay and then I'll start editing from there, which I sort of feel that I don't encourage that, because I always feel your ideas change while you think. While we talk, our ideas change.
Yes.
It's constant, right?
Yes.
So with paper 3, with your creative writing, plan ahead. Have a good mind map. Choose a topic that you can speak about. Do not talk about things that are way out. Things that are talk about things that are interesting. Write down things that will grip your examiner's attention. When you go to your transactional text, it's formats, formats, formats. I tell my learners, I give them their formats. I show them how to sort of pre-plan with their formatting, because remember, that's where you're getting marks. You're getting marks in paper 3 for formatting, for planning, for editing, and for proofreading, right? With paper 2, that's the literature and the poetry part. They feel very intimidated about writing an essay. Whereas if you actually know how to plan an essay, it's not retelling a story. It's focusing on that element that your examiner has asked you to write about, whether it's your characters of your novels and your plays, whether it's your where's the climax in the story, what is the internal conflict between your characters, right? So my learners should take a highlighter and highlight what is expected of them, and not retell a story.
Yes.
Because remember, your examiner knows the story.
Absolutely.
You've read the book. I don't want to know if you know the story. Your examiner wants to know if you can apply yourself with the question, and if you know the different aspects of that, where tone comes in, and style of writing, where you have themes, that sort of thing there.
So I have to ask you 2 questions though. Many people will say to us, you can't really prepare for a creative writing exam. Is that true? Because right now you're saying to me, actually you can pre-prepare.
We have a creative writing workshop, and it's lots of fun, right? So we play word games. So I'll tell my learners, I'll say, for example, if we're doing something on, let's take social media, and I'll say, start, and moms can do this at home.
Yeah.
You don't have to come to the workshop. You can do this at home with your child. You take a word, and say, for example, we start off with the word, you choose a word, any word.
Birthday.
Right, birthday. So all adjectives associated with the word birthday. So you'll have celebration. You're right. You'll have euphoria. You'll have the coming together of family. You'll perhaps say anticipation. And if you want to look at it, you get a negative connotation of something and a positive connotation. So you decide, with the word birthday, do I want to have a narrative story? Do I want to describe it in a descriptive way? Or do I want to reflect on perhaps a birthday that I had many years ago that shaped the way I became today?
Oh, wow.
You understand what I'm saying?
We can actually do this with our kids at home to encourage general creative writing. Then my next question comes in is, many of the learners from early ages, and we see a lot of this in therapy, have problems with higher language processing. So when they get comprehensions, verbally they can give you the answers, but they can't actually write that information down or put that information down to paper. How do we help to combat this?
Okay, very interesting that you told me that. A few days ago, I've had a father that came to my home, and he looked very distressed, and so, I don't know. It's like when he spoke, I was tearing, because he has the most remarkable child. Every child is remarkable.
Absolutely.
And he just came with this sort of like, Shanaaz, please, you got to help him. His teachers say that he can't learn. It's difficult. But the funny thing is, when he's with me, he knows what he's saying. When he talks to me, his answers are all correct. But some kids have a problem putting pen to paper.
Yes.
So we teach them application. We teach them application, smaller sentences. Try not to use long-winded sentences with too many commas, so much of comma splice. You want to put all their ideas on paper, and you think you want, what my learners basically do is they try and write every possible answer in the hope that the examiner will mark.
And see one at least.
But they don't know that an examiner has to look at the first part of the paper and then discard the rest, and then it's got to be in context with the question.
Yes.
Right? So for a learner, there are so many different aids that are available on the internet. They do allow you at school during special cases where you can go and see a psychologist or a child psychologist, where your child has extra time to write.
Yes.
Where there are some schools that even allow you to talk, right? The learner talks and somebody, a professional person under a very strict, controlled circumstances are sitting and writing for that learner.
Absolutely. That's amazing to hear that that's available.
You understand? And many parents don't know that there, and there's the stigma attached with having a child that perhaps finds it a little bit difficult. But why do we attach stigmas to children? Why do we label kids? Why do we think that every child has to be the same in a classroom? With poetry, I take my learners outside. If we're doing something about nature, they need to feel, touch, know. They need to process it in order to, then when you see that poem in exam, oh, I remember what we did.
That's it. You make it real.
You make it real.
Shanaaz, I think I keep saying to you, you're a wealth of information when it comes to educational tips.
Exactly.
And it really helps not just the children, but us as mothers as well, to be able to chart our way forward so that the anxiety at the home level is a little bit eased up because of things like this. But I know that I always say I need to have you on a show specifically for something else as well. But your story goes so much more than just this. And I want to touch on it briefly before we hit the end of the segment. You on another journey as well. Tell me about the writing that you're currently doing.
Okay, so it came to me one day, right, when I was making wudu, and I looked in the mirror, which is, I don't want to sound vain. And I looked at myself, and I many years have lapsed here, right? And it wasn't a little girl that I saw anymore. It was actually a woman, right? And I looked into the mirror, and obviously there are lines in our hands, and I said, you know, why not celebrate that? Why not celebrate every line that we have, or the frown lines, or why are we so bent on covering up the scars that make us stronger?
Absolutely.
I don't know if you understand. Like,
it's the lines that tell our stories. It's our history etched on our faces.
And that's the book that I'm currently trying to, like, I start and then I close the book, and I stop for a while because I feel that it's a bit sensitive, so I close it. But for example, like, we can take an example for you. I'll start. I'll say, this is the line. Perhaps that was the first line you got, perhaps with a devastating news that you got. Or this is the line where the joy came, right, from something that you never thought would be possible. So every woman has a story. And I want women out there to tell me their story, for us to know that, you know what, there's no need to hide the pain. So we don't have to celebrate the pain, but we can get strength from each other, because that's what we actually need. We all need strength.
Absolutely. And we can only go through it with strength from each other. So we're looking forward to seeing your book. Thank you so much for joining us
and thank
on
you for
air. It's always
having
such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
As I mentioned before, Shanaaz is a wealth of information, not just an educator, but an inspirer and motivator. And I wish we had more time to talk about this, because besides the book, those lines have many stories behind it. And I know a person like her has an entire story that one day needs to be shared with all of us. So we'll keep encouraging her, because one day we want to be sitting and discussing that book with her. Stay tuned. When we come back, we have another fabulous guest on air. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the last segment of the show. We're chatting to a lady whose cakes are being devoured by everyone, who's in the forefront of the baking industry, and whose cakes are not only coming in looking beautiful, but is meticulous, perfection in detail, and tastes absolutely amazing. Mehnaz Nanak from I Love Cake, Johannesburg. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the studio.
Alaikum salam. Thank you, Zaheerah.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. Long overdue, but you've been in this industry for such a long time. I don't think you can even remember how long it's been.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Mehnaz, what made you decide that this was an industry you wanted to be a part of?
I did a lot of things when I was younger. I did cake decorating, I did candle making, I did decoupage, I painted a bit, and this was the only thing that fitted into my lifestyle. So I carried on with it. I lived in Botswana at the time.
Oh wow, okay.
Yes, and I didn't bake as largely then as I do now. I moved to Joburg and then needed to find something to keep me busy, and that's how it came about.
But it's amazing, so many women that I speak to often say, it almost just stumbled across where something that they really enjoyed doing, something that they were creative with, turned out to be a profession. You sound like someone who's always had a very strong creative side from all the other activities that you were doing. And when I see it in your baking and that, I definitely see it translating through there as well.
Yeah, well, I'm from a creative family, so definitely I had some creative hormone in me. And like I said, this was just maybe one of the only things that I could use in my life. There were only so many candles I could make, or only so many trays I could paint, or only so many lampshades I could decoupage. But this, obviously, if I baked, there was always someone to eat it at home or appreciate it, or there was always an event where you could use the cake.
But being in a home environment, I think from a culture that we come from, food and baking is always a huge part of it, and it's always a prevalent part of every event we have, whether it's a good event, a sad event, any event, always revolves around food and baking. What made you decide that this was something you wanted to turn into a business? How does one know when they're ready to make that step to turn it into a business?
I think living in Joburg, firstly, I was on my own. I have no family here, and I needed something to keep me busy. I was very excited to move here because it was easy to get equipment, it was easy to get tools, and so my work got better as I got better tools. And then I didn't know my way around Joburg and stuff so much, so being at home and focusing on what I liked doing just evolved from there.
That you're absolutely right. I think access to having the right tools and knowing which ones to buy is what takes an amateur into a professional as well. And that's something I think many of us miss, is about knowing even how to get into the right tools. But we'll talk about that later. I just want to chat about your journey first, starting here. When you look at how far you've come and how much cakes have changed. I mean, a cake is not just a cake anymore. It's like a masterpiece of artwork. How far have you seen it changing, or the way you've had to evolve your style from when you started to where you are now?
I haven't evolved my style so much. I feel like each cake decorator has their own style. Like, before I even see a name linked to a picture, I would almost always know who made it. Each person has their own style, and there's certain things that people ask me to do that I'm very excited to do, and you can see it in the cake because I would take extra time and make it look pretty because it's something I enjoy doing. But when somebody asks me to make something that I don't particularly think is nice, like dinosaur cakes that have like mud on it, and it's supposed to look messy, is not the sort of thing that I want to really do. And then, well, I don't know.
You have to figure a way through that. But you have a son. Messy dinosaur cakes must be part of the program at home.
Well, his birthday is coming up this weekend, and I asked him to design his cake. Thankfully, he asked me for a square cake. He drew this picture out. He wants a square cake, and he showed me how the Smarties need to go alongside the borders of the cake, and that's all he wants.
So you've got another cake decorator on hand.
Yes, I do.
I said to Mehnaz earlier, I don't understand how someone who makes such divine cakes can be so thin. So I need to figure out how you manage to balance your whole life. How do you manage to be a mum and to have a family life and to be part of community events? Because we know you're always part of many community events and people always call on you and you never say no to it.
No.
And you manage your professional life. So how do you manage to find the balance between it all?
It's very difficult. It's the greatest challenge of my life. I need to plan. So if people book their cakes well in advance, it makes it easy for me to make the decor ahead of time, or order flowers ahead of time, or make my icing ahead of time and things like that. The only thing that I really need to do closer to collection date is bake the actual cake and then put the icing on. But like cakes like fondant, the decor can be made ahead. If I need to cover a cake, for example, in blue or pink or purple, I can color that ahead of time as well. I really do have to plan everything. Shopping, running out of eggs, running out of flour. It happens to me a lot. But if I plan correctly, then I don't really have a lot of problems.
You know, many of the women that come on the show always talk about that. It's about the fact that they need to be more organized, that they have to just make sure that they're planning things. And if things are planned properly and they're organized, they feel that they can cope a lot better with everything else. And I think you've just reiterated that as well,
yes.
that planning is a huge part of being able to manage everything in our lives.
There are a lot of things that I can't plan. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, I had my kids get ill. So that was a disruption. But that would have meant that I needed to get up extra early and work earlier hours of the morning and then later hours of the night, so that when they needed to be seen to during the day, I could be with them. But besides that, I don't have very major struggles with putting things together and getting them out on time. Yeah.
When you speak about the planning and the organizing and that goes into the baking, I think very often many of us don't understand the amount of effort behind the scenes. And you speak about, like, for example, when your kids are sick, waking up a little bit earlier and going to bed a little bit later. And I think, when this is why I always say, firstly, support home industries, always. And the second thing I always say is, don't argue about price, because you never ever understand how much goes into it. It's not a factory, it's not a machine that's taking it out. It's a person sitting there and building a business for their family. And I think, when you're talking about the hours that go in, we have absolutely no idea how much it goes in terms of preparation for this beautiful cake that's always sitting at our tables.
That's true. Yeah, it does. Sometimes I can look at a cake and think that it's not going to take me as long. But then when I start with it, it does. I mean, I can have like a cake not rising as well as I need it to. Or like I had at one period a bad batch of flour. We changed everything. We changed our egg supplier, we used different milk, and then it turned out to be a brand that we'd been using for a long time, and I think it was just a bad batch at that point. But then that slows me down, because then I can't get my cakes out on time, and then I've got to redo everything and then work like really late hours. But shukr, we've somehow always managed. Lots of dua.
Alhamdulillah.
We managed to get through.
But that's always the case. I think duas are always important, and we forget that. But in terms of also being able to have a support system, I mean, you mentioned you came from Botswana, living in Johannesburg. For me, I often find that having a strong support system really works in terms of being able to get things done. How do you manage that?
Well, my parents live overseas, but I speak to my mom every morning. So she checks in on me and checks in on my schedule for the day. And often I will say, I have so much to do, I don't know how I'm going to get through. And she'll say, you're going to get through. Don't worry. Say Bismillah, it's going to be okay. And it usually is. It usually is.
And there's nothing like a mother's duas.
That's true.
That gets us through everything.
Yeah.
When it comes, I mean, recently I've seen more of the cakes that you've been doing, and it's besides the colors that are absolutely fabulous, your attention to detail in those cakes are absolutely astounding. It's remarkable. How do you manage to be able to put that much of detail into it? Because I'm sure half the detail we don't even notice, and you know that's in there.
Yes, that's true. Again, I need notice. So like I start on a Monday, I prepare all my decor for cakes that are leaving on a Saturday, on a Monday and a Tuesday. And I put that aside, I allow it to dry. Like if I'm doing flowers or little teddy bears or figurines or whatever it is, it needs a couple of days to dry. So I need to start by the Monday, put everything aside. Then come like Thursday, we start baking. Friday, we cover the cakes. And then Friday evening, we'll stack if it's a 2-tiered or a 3-tiered cake. And then it's just to add the other little things later on. That takes a lot of time. So usually on a Monday, I'm from the morning till the evening making all these other little things that you probably don't notice.
Absolutely. So I have to ask you then, what has been the biggest disaster in your kitchen thus far?
It wasn't in my kitchen.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yes, thank goodness it wasn't in my kitchen. It was on the way to deliver a cake. It was in January.
Okay, that doesn't sound too good either.
No, but it was really hot. It was much hotter than we thought it would be. And it was a 3-tiered wedding cake that had chocolate collars right around the entire thing. It looked beautiful. It left the house in perfect shape, but along the way it started melting.
Oh no.
Yeah, and there's no time to contact the bride and say, look, this is what's happened to your cake. And because it started getting soft, it started caving into each other. So I had to stop midway, take them apart. We got to the venue, got into the kitchen, took a table aside and redid the collars for all 3 tiers and put it up. And just after she walked in, we went out and put the cake on stage.
And it looked fine, and
it looked fine. She didn't even know.
Oh my!
I told her afterwards, but she didn't even know. But never again. I've decided no more chocolate collars. Not in South Africa. It gets very hot. Yeah, you don't know. Like today's a nice day. But like sometimes it can just get blazing hot and you're not prepared for it.
Absolutely. You know what, after that story, we're going to have to take a very quick ad break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion on triumphs in the cake industry. Stay tuned. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back. We're chatting to Mehnaz from I Love Cake Johannesburg. You can follow her on all her social media profiles and see the remarkable work coming out there. It always astounds me. Actually, it never fails to astound me what talent we have within our community. But it's time that we need to celebrate this talent. And talent comes in various forms. And today it's coming in the form of cake. And who doesn't love cake? And I always say that, you know, when we see success and excellence, which is synonymous with our religion, then we need to celebrate it. And that is why we have Mehnaz sitting in the studio with us today. Mehnaz, we spoke about, and you so willingly shared, the biggest disaster with the wedding cake. But what has been for you a highlight or something that has stood out for you? I'm sure there are many moments. The lovely thing about baking cakes is you're always part of somebody's happiest moments.
That's true, yeah.
What has been one in particular that has always just stood out for you as something special?
I can't say one. It has to be all. Most of my clients are happy. Oh, very well. I think
all are.
happy. But like when you get that message from a bride, or you get that message from a birthday girl that sends you a voice note to tell you how much she loved her Barbie cake, it just makes your day.
Sweet.
Yeah, it just makes your day.
Absolutely. And I must say, I know you made one for me that I didn't even know you were making, and you didn't know who you were making it for either. And it was hilarious, but I absolutely loved it.
I wish they had made a better choice of cake for you.
So let me ask you a little bit about pairing of flavors in that. If a client comes to you and says to you, you know, we want to pair this and this, how do you advise in terms of pairing of flavors, knowing which flavors work together? I must also say the one thing that I love about Mehnaz's cakes is it feels like you're sitting in your grandmother's home and you're eating cake. It doesn't taste like box cake and things like that. It feels like home cake.
Thank you for saying that, because that's exactly what it is. Over the years, I have really only used about 3 or 4 recipes. The flavors change. With a chocolate cake, I substitute with cocoa, but it is a very traditional cake. I didn't learn how to bake. Nobody taught me how to bake. I stumbled across a recipe that worked for me, and I've just used that with all my cakes ever since. Flavors that change my cakes a bit is like burfi, because that would be a filling. So it's not the actual sponge. The sponge is still the same, but the filling is different, and that changes the flavor completely.
I didn't even know you'd get a burfi filling in a cake. That's something I need to be ordering soon.
And then, well, carrot cake is carrot cake. Yes. So, and that would have like a cream cheese frosting, red velvet with cream cheese. Vanilla with a caramel and buttercream filling. But the cake itself, like you said, it feels like you're sitting and eating your grandmom's cake. I think the recipe is probably that old.
But that's what I absolutely loved about it. And it wasn't a once-off thing. And I can say this absolutely with no bias, because a cake that I had received from a friend, Mehnaz didn't even know that she was making it for me, and we were all blown away by the taste of it. And I've subsequently tasted a number of the cakes, and every single time the consistency has been the same.
Yes.
It's always just good home cake.
It should be, and I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you appreciated it.
So tell me a little bit about pairing of flavors. How do we even know how to pair flavors? Because for some of us that are just traditional and want the traditional cakes, I mean, now I'm listening to a burfi filling in a cake, and that just sounds amazing.
Well, I don't pair flavors so much. Like it would be my vanilla would probably have a caramel filling and then a vanilla buttercream. Same thing with the chocolate cake, which you've had. You might have different flavors if you have a tiered cake. So if you were having a birthday cake that had 2 or 3 tiers, then I would suggest you do a different flavor per tier, but not really in one cake that I do different flavors. Yeah.
And if you have clients, obviously, that come to you and want the most absurd of flavors.
Thank goodness there hasn't been that many. Yeah, there hasn't been that many, actually. But if I did think that they had selected something that I didn't think would work, I'd try it out and taste it and then let them know. And if they still feel like they want to go ahead with it, then I'll go ahead with it.
So you know what? That's a good business person, because you're giving advice and then you're still going with whatever the client wants.
Yeah,
which works well. When we talk about home industries and we talk about entrepreneurs, the women in our community are so strong. We have such remarkable, dynamic entrepreneurs around us. But I wonder, what is your advice for entrepreneurs? Because it's such a difficult field. I mean, all of us can turn around and say, I'm an entrepreneur and I want to do something. But to actually have that persistence to follow through on it and to last in it, because it's a tough game to be able to work on your own, run your own business, put yourself out there, put something of yourself into every product you're selling out there, and still keep going. What is the most difficult part of being an entrepreneur for you?
I can't say there is a difficult part of being an entrepreneur for me, but I feel like you need to have a love for what you're doing.
Yes.
I feel like if you're driven by passion for what you do, then there can only be success. So, yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
So you've got to actually, I think that really is a good sum up of it, because I think if you're passionate about something, your success is going to be there, because
Definitely.
the passion will drive the commitment to stick
That's true.
into it
That's
and to
true.
keep going.
Even if you're not doing it as a business, you will continue to do it because you love it, which is what happened with me. I just
Absolutely.
baked at home, whether there was anyone to eat cake or not, but like I liked baking, and we'd always have a tea time treat, and then that just evolved from there, where people started asking me to bake for them, and then where I was working, I started baking for everyone in the office, and that went from birthday cakes to then wedding cakes, and then that just carried on when I moved to Joburg.
So you see, passion followed you.
I guess so, yes.
Mehnaz, where do you see yourself going from here? I mean, you've been in this industry for such a long time. Your name is well known. It's renowned amongst almost everyone around the Gauteng area. But where do you see yourself going? What are your dreams? Where do you want to see yourself taking your business to?
That's difficult to answer. I don't think I've given it that much thought. It's exhausting. Like, as my kids are getting older, it's becoming more and more difficult to do very detailed cakes because they need more of our time. But again, it's therapeutic in its own way. It gives me a break from my very busy life as a mom or my very busy day with them. So I do sometimes feel like, as difficult as it is to work on a cake, I do want to still have that time to myself and work on these finicky details and just have my moment to myself and just be in it and enjoy it.
Absolutely. But somehow I get the impression that even if you cut down somewhat and have that time, you're never going to be leaving this because the passion is so strong.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
Absolutely. And how does your family feel or respond to all these cakes? Is everybody loving and enjoying cakes in your home?
We all love cake. I love cake.
I love
they
cake.
love cake.
There we go. It needs to be the motto.
Yes, it is. It should be.
But are there any firm favorites with any of them?
No, they all like plain cake. If it's uniced with some sprinkles on it, that's what they want to eat. It's easy to please my family.
It's very easy to please. I'm sure they're tired of seeing all the icing and everything else that goes with it.
Yeah, that's true.
Mehnaz, tell us a little bit about the community work that you've been involved in, because I know that you're also a part of a number of charity organizations that are always giving back in the community. When they call on you, you're part of always cook-offs and bake-offs and all of that. Tell us a little bit about how you fit that in and why you feel that as a business person, that is something that you want to be part of.
Well, we need to give back. And I feel like when they approach me to be part of these things, it's an honor for me. And they're giving me the opportunity to earn some sawab and give back to the community and everyone else.
That's such a beautiful way of looking at it, because I think, many people always think that it's taking away from them, and you saying it's a time for me to actually just gain some sawab. That's a beautiful way of looking at it. Alhamdulillah. Mehnaz, it's been such a pleasure to chat to you. I think we've learned so much from you, and you're such a wealth of information. I think even, for many of our viewers at home who are in the baking industry, who are doing baking and that as well, can take so many tips from you in terms of just building that passion and taking that passion to the next level as well.
Thanks, Zaheerah. Yes, I think so. I think, like I said, find something that you're passionate about, work on that and take it to the next level.
And I think the one thing that Mehnaz mentioned as well, that nothing comes without perseverance and many, many years of practicing. No one is just going to be good at something on day one, except for somebody like Mehnaz, who's very creative. But for the rest of us, we need to work a little bit. We need to put in a little bit of effort. And as Mehnaz said, you've got to just be organized, just be prepared and make sure you're ahead of time with everything, because then you can find a way. If we can't balance, we can always juggle. We can find a way to juggle our families and our businesses and our community commitments, and everything somehow pans out okay.
That's true.
Mehnaz, shukran so much for joining us on air. We'll be following your social media pages.
Thank you very much,
and delighting ourselves with the visuals that you put up there.
Thank you very much.
That was Mehnaz from I Love Cake Johannesburg. You can follow her on her social media pages and see everything that you need to know about it. What always impresses me about women like her in our community is their willingness to share, whether it's sharing a failure, whether it's sharing what they enjoy the most, or even just how they manage to balance it. The only way we are able to grow is when we look at the successes of other women, we learn from them, and we walk the journey with them. And women like Mehnaz from I Love Cake are willing to do that with us. So alhamdulillah for the blessings in our community as well. Shukran so much for joining us on air. Inshallah, we'll be in touch with you next week, same time, same place. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.